Welcome, everyone. This is DerekJ Speaks, and today we are here with a rare Monday Night RAW review, recapping the August 8th, 2022 edition of Monday Night Raw live from the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. We are in week 2 of Triple H's Monday Night Raw. Of course, Raw under the creative direction of Triple H, who officially took over last week. Last week's episode of Monday Night Raw was all Triple H's vision, and from what we saw, it was not bad. Wasn't perfect, but it was a good start. A lot of great wrestling and some good promos and a very well-paced episode of Raw last week. SmackDown later on in the week was not overly impressive, but it was okay by usual SmackDown standards. But the one thing that we saw between Raw and SmackDown last week, and going a little earlier than both shows, going back to SummerSlam, was Triple H bringing back some old familiar faces who were let go, who were released by WWE over the last year or so, and Triple H brought some of them back. We saw that with Dakota Kai and Io Shirai. We saw it on SmackDown with Karrion Kross, and we have seen an overall emphasis placed on some old black and gold NXT alumni, certain individuals like Tommaso Ciampa, and of course bringing back Karrion Kross and Io Shirai and Dakota Kai, Ricochet, and a bunch of other people, Shayna Baszler on SmackDown. And so the question was, would that continue? We had the report coming out of the weekend after SmackDown that Triple H was not going to be slowing down as far as bringing back talent was concerned, and we saw that on this show, on this night, when at the end of the night we saw another old NXT name brought back in the form of Dexter Lumis in a storyline that was playing out all throughout the show in the background. You had to pay very close attention to really see what was going on, and it was all building over the course of the night, and the final stamp and mark on the story for tonight was the reveal in the crowd of a man wearing some kind of hood or some kind of mask being hauled off by security, and it was revealed to be Dexter Lumis. Although much like many of the other segments that were happening before, this took place entirely in the background. The camera never directly focused on the situation that was going on, especially when it was revealed to be Dexter Lumis. You only saw it in the background, the commentators made mention of it, but they never directly put the camera in Dexter Lumis's face. Of course, people have taken screenshots. I believe a photo of him more up close was taken on their IG page, but other than that, a lot of the stuff that seemingly had to do with him, if we are to believe that the other things that took place earlier in the night are in connection to Dexter Lumis, all of it was taking place in the background of other segments going on, of other stories that were happening. So you know what, since this was the big thing of the night, this was the overarching story, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm going to be kind of jumping around. This is not going to be a formal, in-depth review of Monday Night Raw. This is not going to be the place for that, but this is the place for me to give my quick thoughts on this story and how it played out and what I think this is going to be leading up to going forward in the future, which as of this moment, I don't really know. So as we recap this, maybe I'll come to some kind of idea. But as of right now, I have no idea what is going on with this storyline. But we can start from the beginning of when we first saw the seeds planted. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't see the very beginning of the show, so I don't know if there was something that might have alluded to anything going on at the very tip top of the show. But the first time that I noticed something, and a lot of other people noticed something was a bit off, was a little in the middle of the show. There was a Kevin Owens backstage promo. Not in the backstage area necessarily, but it was in the parking area, in the loading dock area, that place of the arena. Of course, earlier on in the night, Kevin Owens had a match against Ezekiel. This was the first time we've seen Kevin Owens on TV in a few weeks. The first time we've seen Ezekiel on TV in a few weeks. Of course, these two have been feuding over the last few months, and I think we got a definite conclusion to this story because the two were supposed to have a match, but I don't even know if the bell rang or not. Maybe it did, but Kevin Owens immediately attacked Ezekiel, just kicked his ass all around ringside, and ended up powerbombing Ezekiel on the ring apron. And they did the whole stretcher job for Ezekiel and all that, so that might have seemingly written off that character and might pave the way for Elias to make his way back on a permanent basis on the TV show going forward. But here, Kevin Owens lays out Ezekiel, and then later on in the night, they cut backstage in that area that I was talking about. Kevin Patrick, the interviewer, he ran up on Kevin Owens, wanted to get his thoughts on why he did what he did. Kevin Owens explaining himself, talking about how he's been gone for a while, now he's back. He just wanted to remind everyone who he really is and how Monday Night Raw is the Kevin Owens show. The usual heel stuff from Kevin Owens, nothing too crazy, but it was completely distracting because in the background, way far off in the distance in the background, you see some kind of commotion going on. There is what appears to be a car crash. A car is crashed into one side of the building. You see security or police or whatever. They're on the scene. They're looking around. They're seeing what's going on. And two random people, Nikki ASH and Dewdrop, are back there. Of course, they're not entirely random because we learned earlier in the night that the two of them are going to be a part of this tournament ongoing for the women's tag team championships. So it's not entirely random that they were there, but just the fact that they were in this particular spot at this particular moment was very random. I even saw some people speculating that maybe one of them were in the car and it crashed, that we might get some kind of recap for it later. A lot of confusion, a lot of people not even knowing if anyone else had noticed it, which is a good touch. A little bit of mystery and intrigue here. A little bit later on in the night, closer towards the main event of the evening, we are hyping up one of the tournament matches for next week's episode of Raw between Dewdrop and Nikki ASH versus Alexa Bliss and Asuka. These are the other two teams representing the Monday Night Raw side in this tournament. So we had a backstage promo with Nikki and Dewdrop, and then we cut to a backstage promo from Alexa Bliss and Asuka. And the two of them are in a location that's near where Nikki and Dewdrop were earlier during the Kevin Owens promo. So Alexa and Asuka, they say what they need to say. Then into the scene comes Bayley, Io Sky, and Dakota Kai. Of course, Io and Dakota Kai both already won their tournament match earlier in the night against Tamina and Dana Brooke. So now they're here and they're antagonizing Asuka and Alexa. But once again, something is going on in the background. This time we see in the background that crashed car is being towed. So that's happening. And then all of a sudden, all of these security guards come together. They hear something on their walkies or whatever, and they run towards the camera, run past the ladies. And it's a good chunk of them. It's like about 5 or 6 security officers running past the women and seemingly heading into the arena to deal with some type of situation that is occurring. The commentators are not mentioning anything that's happening. No one's referencing anything that's going on. And at this point, Bayley and her crew, they walk away the other direction, and then coming past them is AJ Styles preparing to go out for the main event. So this whole sequence, all this stuff going on backstage, is just complete craziness. But this took place right before the main event of the show, and that added a certain level of intrigue, at least for me, as far as trying to figure out what in the world is going on here. What is this all building up to? What is being set up? You got the security guards, you got the car crash and all this, and all of it taking place in the background. Very subtle. Not necessarily that subtle at this particular point, but it is all taking place in the background. You can't really figure out exactly what it is. You can't predict what it is, but I found it very intriguing. And of course, that led into the main event. We had a match, a no disqualification match between The Miz and AJ Styles. This was built off of the two of them getting involved in the United States Championship match earlier in the show with Bobby Lashley and Ciampa, which I thought was an incredible championship match on the show. The two of them were brawling at ringside. They brawled into the ring. They brawled through the crowd. They brawled to the back. And that set up the main event. No disqualification match with AJ Styles and The Miz. Fine match. Nothing special. You got a few weapons here and there. Not going to give a complete play-by-play of the match. But we did see AJ Styles hit the phenomenal forearm, took out The Miz, went for the cover, and Ciampa, who had already wrestled earlier in the night, he came back out, and now I don't remember if he pulled the referee's leg out of the ring or if he pulled AJ out. I believe it was the ref, but either way, he broke the cover. And then Ciampa and AJ, they start brawling. This led to Ciampa outside the ring, but on the ring apron. And AJ knocks him off the apron, and Ciampa goes crashing down through a table that was set up on the floor earlier by AJ Styles, I believe. So Ciampa's taken out of the equation. AJ redirects his focus back over to The Miz. He goes up top, going for the forearm again, but this time as he was in the middle of his springboard, he's up on the top rope, and The Miz just chucks a steel chair right into AJ's face. I thought that was a pretty cool visual. AJ just plants and just falls right down the ring. The Miz hits the skull-crushing finale, but it's only good for a 2 count. I for sure thought that was going to be the finish of this match, but it was not. So after some more back and forth action between the two of them, it eventually led to AJ hitting the Styles Clash to pick up the win. So AJ Styles gets the win over The Miz. Miz is having a little bit of a losing streak going for himself right now. So I don't know what that's about, but AJ, who has not really been a main focal point at all on this show, he gets a win in the main event, but even still, he is not the focal point of the show, because as he's celebrating his victory, the camera cuts over. The camera's still focused on AJ, but it is now set in a position where you see what is going on once again in the background, this time in the front row in the crowd. We see a bunch of security guards all crowding and restraining and detaining this individual who has a hood or a mask covering his face. This even got the attention of AJ Styles, who looked over and was looking at what was going on there. He was very perplexed by the whole situation. He then turned his attention away. He looked the other way, but the camera was still focused on AJ, but still had this commotion in the crowd in the background. And that is when we see the hood ripped off of this figure's face, and it's revealed to be Dexter Lumis. Dexter Lumis, who was released by WWE earlier this year. It was a little after WrestleMania time when there was a mass bloodletting of cuts, particularly from NXT talent. That was the same group of individuals that were cut. That was the same group that Dakota Kai was a part of when she was released. And much like Dakota Kai, who was brought back by Triple H has seemingly brought back Dexter Lumis as well. Well, not seemingly, he very clearly brought back Dexter Lumis, who now has a very prominent spot on the show, at least for this week. A very subtle, slow burn story unfolding in the background that may very slowly make its way into the foreground and gain even more attention. It was earlier in the day, on this day, that Fightful Select reported that WWE had plans of bringing back Dexter Lumis. And seeing that report from earlier and then seeing how all this played out here, it is very reminiscent of just a few days ago on SmackDown. It was earlier in the day on Friday that it got reported, and the rumor was floating around that WWE had re-signed Karrion Kross and Scarlett, or that they were in communication with the two of them and working out some deal to bring them back. And then later that same night, you see Karrion Kross coming out there in the main event segment of the show to attack Drew McIntyre and basically threaten Roman Reigns, the undisputed Universal Champion. So that was crazy how that unfolded. And we see a similar scenario here where early in the day, it's being reported and thrown out there that Dexter Lumis has been brought back. And now we see by the end of this show, that is the case. And now the attention is on Dexter Lumis, who has been doing this silent, psycho, serial killer type character ever since he was brought in to WWE on the NXT brand. Although he's been doing this for a little longer than that. He's been the Samuel Shaw character before. Of course, Samuel Shaw talked a lot more than Dexter Lumis ever did. But of course, Dexter Lumis was down in NXT, and then the whole story with him and Indy Hartwell played itself out, and the connection with him and Johnny Gargano. So all of that took place, and then he got cut earlier this year, and he's popped up in the Indies under the Samuel Shaw name again, although he has been working in a very similar character as Dexter Lumis. The same gear, the same type of dead-eye stare and all of that. He's been doing the same thing, even on the Indies. So I just find it very fascinating that Triple H has an affinity for this guy, as well as he does a lot of these NXT people, particularly people from the black and gold era of NXT. And he is on a mission to right some wrongs that his father-in-law committed, or at least approved of, earlier this year, even last year, in the case of Karrion Kross. And he is bringing some of these people back. Now, Karrion Kross, it looks like he's going to be positioned as one of the top heels on SmackDown going forward. I don't know if they're going to completely insert him into the championship picture with Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre right now. I say have him introduced right now and then focus on him a little bit, but let him kind of be a background player right now, and then really heat him up and bring him to the forefront after Clash at the Castle. If the plan is for Roman Reigns to lose that championship, one of them or both of them, to Drew McIntyre, then I say let it happen and let Drew get the win and set up Karrion Kross as the first big challenger for Drew McIntyre. McIntyre's going to have a top heel to go up against. And if Karrion Kross is brought back and he's going to be put in that spot, then I can't think of a better heel for him to go up against than him. So that takes care of the SmackDown situation. But what about Raw? And what about this stuff with Dexter Lumis? The way it played itself out on this show, we are clearly not in a position where we are going to get all the answers up front. We are left with even more questions than we already had before. What is going on? What is happening? Why Dexter Lumis? Why is this all happening? Is the stuff on this show connected? For all we know, Dexter Lumis is a completely separate case than what they were doing before. We saw backstage them dealing with the car crash and all that, but that does not necessarily indicate that Dexter Lumis was directly tied to that situation, because we saw the security officers backstage, they were dealing with that, but then they got called out to the arena to go deal with a situation. So it's very possible that there are two different scenarios playing out, and we just so happen to see one piece of the puzzle in Dexter Lumis, but there's an entirely different piece of the puzzle with someone else crashing a car. So the question is, where is this gonna lead? What is this leading up to? What is this building up to? And the easy answer right now is, I don't know. I don't think anyone really does know. But it's fun to speculate. It's fun to think about where this could lead. And I think the obvious idea is something that should be addressed, kind of the elephant in the room, the fact that Monday Night Raw was in Cleveland tonight, and many people spent the entire weekend hyping themselves up to believe that we would see a return / debut of another old NXT Black and Gold era superstar, one of Triple H's favorites from that period of time, that being Johnny Gargano. A lot of people were expecting Johnny Gargano to appear on the show tonight. He has been very coy these last several months about what his next move is going to be as far as signing with a company. A lot of people were up in the air as far as where they could see him going, but once Triple H took over as head of creative in WWE, I think a lot of people, myself included, were very much rooting for the idea of Gargano re-signing with WWE, coming to the main roster and having some type of top spot, whether that's as a singles guy or whether that's him reuniting with Tommaso Ciampa. Many people thought that maybe the U.S. title match with Bobby Lashley and Ciampa would be an opening to set up a Johnny Gargano return and get a big pop in his hometown of Cleveland and set something up with him and Ciampa either as rivals or as partners. But we saw no signs of Johnny Gargano. But could it be a case where it would have been very obvious for Gargano to appear on this show and they just held him off, and maybe he has some kind of connection with this Dexter Lumis situation going on? Of course, there is a history there. The whole Dexter Lumis Indy Hartwell story was tied to Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae and that whole faction there, and there was a bond that formed with Gargano and Dexter Lumis. So because of that, it's very easy to assume that there could be some kind of connection there. And maybe Johnny Gargano, he may not have debuted tonight, but he could come in at some point down the line as the story progresses. I do think, whether he's a part of this story or not, I do believe Johnny Gargano will come back to WWE at some point, and we will see him pop up on Raw or SmackDown at some point in the very near future. Whether it's a few weeks down the road, a few months, either way, I fully expect Gargano to be back. Whether or not he's in connection with this storyline going on, that remains to be seen. But they got me hooked. They got me very attentive of Raw and it made me want to see what was going to happen in that main event. It made me look forward to a main event match with The Miz. So kudos to you right there. And I appreciate the detail with this story, at least in terms of them keeping all of it in the background, no one really mentioning it. It it's supposed to make it feel a little more real and genuine, like anything can happen. This is not a part of the show type of thing. Like we have a show going on, and whatever this is not a part of it. Although obviously it is. If it was actually real, something like that, it would not be shown on camera this way. It would not have any prominent spots, but it was very clearly placed in a position to catch the eye of the viewer, any eagle-eyed viewers out there who are looking for stuff like that. So I thought that was very good, and I can appreciate them taking their time with whatever story is being told here, not wanting to give all the answers right away. We don't know what happened. We don't know why the car crashed. We don't know why any of this was happening. We don't know why it's Dexter Lumis who was being arrested and taken away at the end of the show. We don't know what his intentions are. And we still might not know that because the Dexter Lumis character does not talk. So that's why I'm thinking that he might not be alone in this. And all the stuff that we saw in the background tonight might not all be just solely him. It could be him and one other person or multiple other people. Who knows? But I am willing to give it a chance. I'm willing to go on this ride and see where it takes us and see how it plays out. And if it leads to a direction and a destination that is bad, then I am willing to admit that. Like, hey, all those weeks or months ago, I thought this was going to be cool. It ended up being disappointing. And, that's just the risk that you run. But I have enough trust in Triple H right now in that I am willing to give this a shot and see where it's going to go, where this is leading, where this is heading. And Dexter Lumis was never one of my favorite characters in NXT. I've never been overly impressed with any of his matches, but he did grow on me. The way that his character, he plays it well. He plays this character to perfection. And I even got a kick out of the storyline with him and Indy Hartwell. I thought it was very entertaining while it lasted. It peaked at the wedding, and there was nothing really else. There was no other place for it to go, so they just kind of stuck around there for a little bit. But yeah, Dexter Lumis has never really been high on my radar. He is not someone who I would have thought to be clamoring to get back. But clearly Triple H sees something in him and sees something in this character that he wants to explore and he wants to do something with on this show. And he is willing to take some time to build a slow burn storyline with him. And I can appreciate that. I hope we don't get answers next week or the week after that. Take your time with it. If you're going to go all in, take your time with it. Let's see where this goes. So I am very intrigued. I'm very interested in seeing where this is all going to head. So that's about it for me. Like I said, this was not a complete run through of Monday Night Raw. There are several other reviewers and podcasters and content creators who I'm sure would be more than happy to give you a full blow-by-blow, match-by-match rundown of this entire show. It was a good show. I liked last week's episode of Raw better, but tonight was still good, and it is still we're still heading in the right direction of making this show bearable again. 3 hours is still tough to get through, but the pacing of the show is a bit better, and having storylines like this that builds intrigue and, doing different character development things and making championships mean more all of that is good and is heading in the right direction of making these shows feel important and feel must see. Now you got a storyline here where it's like, I am very interested to watch Raw next week and see where it goes. So doing more of that, and if you do that and you do it consistently, this show can finally get back to being good and being entertaining and being fun to watch. So that's about it for me. Thank you all for listening. If you like what you hear, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it amongst all your friends and your peers and your family and whoever else you want to share it with. Comment in the comment section down below what your thoughts were of this show, of Triple H's creative direction going forward, and what you think is going to happen with this Dexter Lumis storyline going on. Follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks, where you'll get a few more thoughts from myself, as well as any updates on the channel and anything that I got going on. So the next time I come on here, I'm not sure. It could be at any moment. This was not planned, but I really wanted to dive into this stuff that took place on the show. So you never know when another video from me might come out. So stay tuned. But as I said, that's it for me now. So until next time, take care, everyone.